If you had turned on any television in a European country between 2008 and 2013, what you would have found were news stories like these.
Eurozone suffers its longest downturn ever as France sinks back into recession. Unemployment in Spain closes 2010 at 20.3%, the highest rate in 13 years. Greece lies bankrupt, humiliated, and ablaze.
It's a fact. After the 2008 financial crash, the European economy suffered a calamity. In countries such as Spain, Italy, and Greece, unemployment rates of over 20% were recorded. The public debt of many countries practically tripled. Thousands and thousands of people were evicted from their homes because they could not pay their mortgages. And, as if that were not enough, the euro suffered a great danger of extinction in 2012. But do you know what? In spite of all that misery, in spite of the calamitous crisis and all of the economic disaster that was experienced, there was one country where the opposite happened. While all major European countries plunged into deep stagnation or recession, the German economy shot up like a rocket. To give you an idea, in 2011 alone, German GDP per capita grew more than any other year since the World Bank have been creating new records. In other words, Germany was not only a country that was clearly not affected by the 2008 crisis, but also took advantage of those years to become much wealthier. In fact, it was from that time onwards that Angela Merkel started to become quite popular in Europe. Let's just say that thanks to this amazing economic takeoff, Germany made it very clear that it was the real leader of the European continent. So, at the time, everybody wanted to be like Germany. Everybody wanted to copy its model of success. The dream of every country was to become as productive as the efficient German economic machine. However, what really was the model of success that everyone wanted to copy? Why did Germany become so prosperous while the rest of the countries plunged into a terrible financial crisis? What were the policies that allowed the German country to be immune to the 2008 crisis? Well, today on Visualeconomik, we're going to answer all of those questions. So, let's get cracking. As we have just told you, if Germany is currently known for anything, it is for being the undisputed leader of Europe, the continent's largest economy, the great example of efficiency and productivity for global industry. Undoubtedly, it is a clear case of economic success. But what if we were to tell you that this was not always the case? What if we were to tell you that Germany also had huge problems not that many years ago? You see, maybe those of you who are younger won't remember, but in the late 1990s, Germany was known as the sick man of Europe. Yes, that's right. At the end of the last century, the German economy was a real disaster. While other European countries such as the United Kingdom, France, and Italy were growing fast, Germany was the laggard of the group. It was the case of full-blown economic stagnation. If you don't believe me, check this out.
The sick man of the euro. The biggest economy in the euro area, Germany, is in a bad way. Article published in The Economist in 1999.
In view of this, the question many of you might be wondering is, how is it possible that the almighty Germany was the sick man of Europe? What happened in the 1990s to make the German economy so bad? Well, does the fall of the Berlin Wall ring any bells? Although it might seem that German unification was great news for the German nation, and on a social level it was, the truth is that on an economic level it meant enormous difficulties. Think about it. Capitalist Germany was very advanced technologically, with great infrastructure, companies, and well-established democratic institutions, and a fully developed market economy. Meanwhile, Soviet Germany, well, it was largely the opposite. It had a very mediocre economy, outdated and with deficient infrastructure. The two sides were like oil and water. In fact, the differences between the two Germanys was so great that even today we can draw on the map and clearly mark the former territory belonging to a socialist Germany simply by measuring the GDP per capita of each region. But the point is that, precisely because of this, following reunification, the German government had to pull out all the stops to try to rescue the eastern zone and try to balance its situation with that of the west. To this end, a lot of infrastructure was built, such as roads, train lines, hospitals, etc. Aid was given to low-income families, and naturally, large investments were made to promote business activity in the region. In short, the German government tried to protect the ex-Soviet economy with the full force of public spending, something that, as many of you may already be imagining, did not exactly come cheap. In order to pay for all these new investments in the former Soviet areas, the government had to get the money from somewhere. And guess where they got it from? Taxes were massively increased, particularly labor taxes, which were largely paid by workers in the West. To give you an idea, in just a few years and due to tax increases, non-wage hiring costs went from 36% to 42%. So what did all this mean? As a Merrill Lynch economist explained in 1999, it became very, very difficult for companies to hire new workers.
A big reason not to invest in the cost of hiring and firing workers. Holger Schmeiding, senior European economist at Merrill Lynch, thinks that Germany has got itself caught in a vicious circle. Article published in The Economist in 1999.
As if this were all not enough, during those years, countries such as Russia and Japan, which were major customers of Germany, also had serious economic problems that forced them to reduce their volume of German imports. At the same time, other countries such as South Korea and China began to develop their industrial sectors and to compete with Germany by stealing its customers. In other words, German companies not only had to face higher wage costs because of taxes, but also lost a lot of revenue internationally, which, not surprisingly, made the situation even worse. So, what was the solution? Well, the solution they found was to lay off and adjust the workforces, stop hiring new workers, and hold on as best they could. Basically, the German labor market became a disaster. It was such a disaster that in 1997, Germany recorded an unemployment rate even higher than that of Greece. That is how bad things had got. Be that as it may, what is important in all this is that the whole crisis served to bring about a political turnaround in Germany. A political turnaround that served to put the country back on its feet and that established the economic reforms that made Germany once again the undisputed leader in Europe following the 2008 crisis. But what exactly were these reforms, and how did Germany manage to emerge from the crisis in the 1990s and become strong enough to take off in the midst of the 2008 crisis? Well, let's take a look.
Preparing for the fall.
This man you see on the screen is Gerhard Schröder. For those who don't know, Schröder was the Chancellor of Germany before Angela Merkel's arrival. And guess what? This man came to power in Germany right in the middle of the crisis of the late 1990s. And he arrived with one clear objective: to alleviate the crisis and to reduce the massive unemployment in the country. To this end, he developed a series of reforms known as the Hartz reforms. These reforms were numerous and came in all shapes and colors. Even so, they can be summarized in two main groups. The first group of reforms consisted of improving the job search process for the unemployed. On the one hand, several public employment agencies were created, training plans were promoted, and in general, the public job-seeking service was professionalized. But on the other hand, the unemployed were also encouraged to accept the jobs offered by the employment agencies just mentioned. That is to say, what happened up until the time of the reforms is that in some cases, many unemployed people preferred to collect the unemployment subsidy until it ran out instead of looking for a job. In Germany, before the Hartz reforms, an unemployed person could be put out of work for up to 32 months while receiving an unemployment benefit averaging 70% of the last salary received. What's more, if that subsidy ran out and a series of requirements were met, a new subsidy without a time limit could be requested that was equivalent to 60% of the last salary, and all of this without even having to be actively looking for a job. Following the Hartz reforms though, these benefits were cut back in duration and generosity, and all unemployed persons who refused job offers without good cause were automatically penalized by losing 30% of their unemployment benefits. However, in exchange for limiting the scope of these unemployment benefits, the government implemented other alternative social benefits such as rent vouchers for low-income families. In this way, people with fewer opportunities or in a position of genuine hardship could receive assistance, but at the same time, the wise guys maintained their incentives for finding employment. Apart from that, Hartz's second group of reforms consisted of encouraging the creation of new jobs. For instance, to encourage companies to hire new personnel, mini jobs were created. And what are mini jobs, you might ask? Basically, they are a kind of jobs of limited duration and working hours that allowed companies to hire workers for specific tasks at very, very low tax rates. In a way, they were like small jobs that functioned as a supplement to the family income and were very attractive for both families and employers. Thanks to this system, employers were able to hire more people at low cost, while at the same time, workers were able to obtain additional income. The government also reduced taxes for workers and promoted programs for the unemployed to start their own businesses and employ themselves. Along these lines, the high personal income tax brackets were reduced by more than 6 percentage points. Workers' social security contributions were reduced by almost 5%, and tax assistance was provided to all new self-employed workers. In other words, a fully fledged tax cut. The question is, did all these reforms work, and did Schroeder's policies succeed in boosting job creation? Well, everything indicates that yes, they did.
Once called the sick man of Europe, Germany is showing new signs of vitality. Germany's jobs miracle is wobbly. Unemployment has sunk to an impressive low, under 3 million.
The truth is that, according to many economists, Schroeder's reforms were a real success for the German economy. However, many other economists suggest that, in reality, there was another major factor that was decisive, a factor that, in reality, had very little to do with the government. Take a look at this graph. Do you remember that we explained to you that in the 1990s, one major problem of the German economy was that wage costs were too high and companies were forced to lay off workers? Well, right from 2002 onwards, these wage costs started to fall. While everywhere else in Europe, people were getting paid higher and higher, wages in Germany remained absolutely stagnant. The question is, why? The reason given by some economists, such as those quoted on the screen, is that trade unions in Germany are not large anti-business movements, nor are they highly ideological extensions of left-wing parties, as is the case in some other countries. In a way, unions in Germany function as small representative bodies for workers, and at the local level, or even at the level of the company itself. Yes, there are no big national unions that don't really represent anyone. So basically, the employees of a company can elect a representative, and that representative has the right to be on the board of directors to negotiate directly with management about the working conditions of the workers. You could say that German unions are much more fluid and adaptable than in other countries, and certainly much closer to the employees. But what are the advantages of all this? Well, in the event of a crisis, such as that of the 1990s or 2008, these unions, which, let's just say, are at a grassroots level, can reach agreements much more easily. What's more, it allows negotiation to be adapted to the reality of each industry and even of each company. For example, does it make sense that the minimum wage for hairdressers is the same as the wealthiest part of Germany as for in the poorest part? No. Union agreements need to be adapted to the realities of each region and/or industry. And Visualeconomik viewers, that is exactly what happened in 2002. As companies began to have big problems, workers agreed to freeze their salaries in exchange for their company's commitment not to lay off more staff. In fact, this kind of pact was different for each industry and company, but each company was able to adjust the conditions with its workers so that everyone could get through with the least amount of problems. So basically, it was a kind of united front to overcome the problems together. Be that as it may, the question now is, how did everything we have told you translate into the 2008 crisis? What happened when the great financial crisis hit the German economy? Well, let's take a look.
Flexibility, the best cushion.
If we were to summarize the 3 concrete reasons why the 2008 crisis did not affect Germany, they would be as follows. The first is, thanks to Schrödinger's reforms and union decentralization, the German economy arrived in 2008 with a very healthy business market and a great capacity to adapt to problems. In addition, following the crisis, and with Angela Merkel in power, the labor market was made even more flexible. Even though Angela Merkel was from the political party opposed to Schröder, she continued to make similar reforms that pursued the same objectives. For example, short-term jobs were implemented, which were basically a kind of mechanism for companies to hire to reduce the working hours of their workers instead of having to lay them off. Taxes were also reduced for families and workers, particularly the poorest, and the government developed a massive plan to invest in SMEs and in programs to make it easier for companies to obtain financing. All of this naturally came with a tight control of public spending so as not to destabilize public finances or damage business confidence. The second reason that saved Germany from the crisis was that indebtedness was very low. German companies and citizens were very cautious when taking on debt, and the truth is that, for this reason, Germany had not fallen into a strong credit bubble as other countries had done. As if that were not enough, it was not a country very taken to banking either. In Germany, in 2008, the weight of the financial sector was only 4% of GDP, while in Europe it reached an average of more than 6%. In other words, the German economy was much less exposed to this financial recession than the rest of Europe. Which brings us to the third and final reason. After all the reforms and adjustments we have discussed in this video, German industry was stronger than ever. During the years leading up to the crisis, German companies had been adapting and correcting the huge problems they had suffered in the previous years. And that, Visualeconomik viewers, was a great advantage. When the crisis came, they were prepared. The industrial sector was very little affected, and considering that this was a sector that employed more than 30% of the workforce, well, of course, the German economy held like a rock. So there you have it. But at this point, it's over to all of you. Were you surprised surprised that Germany was such a mediocre economy in the 1990s? What factor do you think was most important in its post-financial crisis economic success? Do you know of any other important reasons that we have not had time to explain in this video? You can leave us your answers in the comments below. And as always, if you like this video, please like and subscribe and hit the little bell button down there so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. And we'll see you next time.